Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about job market and employment and unemployment in Ukraine. We will talk how it relates to the general trends, what is happening in the world, what are similarities, what are the differences. We'll definitely talk about the unemployment, the reasons for that, about some of the impacts that especially COVID-19 made with the transformation of Ukrainian market. And overall, we will talk about the state policies in the field of the employment, in the field of the creation of the job markets, and what we can do to make this part of the social life more active and more positively influencing the economic trends. But let us start from the general overview of the market, about its size and about its structure. So officially, we can see that if we take like the official numbers, that there are 42 million of people living in Ukraine. According to the Ukrainian Statistical Service, that is called Ukrstat, for 2019, there were 28.5 million of citizens who are at the working age. And that's simply starting from 15 years, ending with 60 or 65, according to Ukrainian legislation. But however, not all of the people are employed, and not all of the people are really working and engaged into this sphere, because somebody is, especially students, they attending higher educational institutions, and then we have people who simply can't work because of the injuries, because of the health issues. They're also part of the pensioners who are not working anymore, especially that were attending the state service and police, other military services, and they go to pension a little bit earlier. So they have the the working age, however, they have already their pensions. So in general, we can see that out of the 28.5 million of people, only 15.5 million of people are really employed. And these are both who are employed officially and also who are unofficially employed. So this shows us that in general, we have the employment rate of 63% in Ukraine, and it is pretty the same, almost the same that that are the employment rate within the European Union. So we can see that in the Northern Europe and also in the Scandinavian countries, there is much more higher level of employment, more than 80% of the citizens. However, at the south of Europe, the level of employment is pretty the same that Ukraine has. While we have 15.5 people that are officially, that are employed, we can see that only 12.8 people are employed officially. And the trouble is that this unknown employment or unofficial employment or hidden employment and hidden unemployment is still very tricky to Ukraine, because we don't have the clear data. Always statistics and surveys show the different data, and it's really hard to build the strategies, because we don't know of what to rely on. And this is one of the major problems, analytical problems and policy making problems, while talking about the employment in Ukraine. So, but nevertheless, I will use here the official data in the number of cases, and we can see that 1.5 million of Ukrainians are unemployed. And in general, if you look at the tendency of the years, we can see that the number of people who are employed decreased, and decreased rapidly. At least starting from the middle of 2000s, we have 9.5 million in 2009. That was a peak, the highest level of the people who were employed. Then we have 15.5 million of people in 2020. It actually decreased because of the coronavirus, and this is the one of the lowest levels of employment in Ukraine. But why this decreased just because people ran away from Ukraine, or we have the overall the growth in level of unemployment? This is one of the interesting questions, and with no clear and direct answer. But partly it could be answered through the if you look the demography and the demographic growth of Ukraine. But if we compare with the world, we can see that the globally employment rate is growing, especially for adult people. There is troubles for youth, one of the most serious problems. The same story we have in Ukraine, but at least for adults, it's growing. However, for Ukraine, it's falling down. So this is one of the problems, and we'll try to talk why it was created and what we should do with that. Then we can also compare with the European Union, and overall we can see that despite the media messages, nevertheless the number of the employment people employed is growing. So there is a fall in 2020 once more because of coronavirus. You can see here more than 5 million of people lost their job already and don't know what will be the outcome for the next few years, how the markets will be rebuilding themselves. But nevertheless, the tendency is growing. But when we see the labor force participation rate, so how many people do participate out of these people who can. So in Europe, you remember it's near 71% in general, but for us it's 63%. You can see that even starting from 2007, the level of participation is pretty the same. So near 62, okay, 61, 65, but near the same. So what is the reason why the number of people engaged is decreasing, the number of people employed is decreasing, and the number of vacancies is increasing? While you can see once more, year by year, in general, the employment rate is pretty the same in our case, and it do respond to the level of the what have the European countries. And we should really search answering this question for demography, for the demographic situation. And here we can see that out of the people who can be employed, the employment rate for the working population starting from 25 years and ending up to 60 years is pretty high. So not high as it could be, but nevertheless, 70% you can see here. The major group is 35, 39 years old, is approximately 80% of the years, percent of the population who is working. But the general trick is actually about the level, the number of the population in Ukraine. So we can direct see starting from 19th that we have the population decline in Ukraine. Once more, it's official state statistic service of Ukraine that is talking that we have in 2020 near 42 million of people. But there are also a number of the other surveys and calculations that are showing that we have even less, so around 39 million of people in our country. And accordingly to that knowledge, the employment, the numbers of employment is falling just because we have lesser and lesser people, while the employment rate, so the percentage of people who are engaged into doing such work, still stays pretty the same. And this is very dangerous. Why? Because you can see some of the tendencies of the growth, or in our case, the decline of the population. If we do nothing, if we stay the same flow, in 2050, we will have officially 38 million of people. And in 2070, we will have 29 million of people. So this is the great population decline that is happening in Ukraine. And the trouble here is not with the number of people itself. but with the structure, the demographic structure of the society that is happening. So you can see the chart of Ukraine 2020, so male and female population with the official, once more, official population, 43 or 42 million of people. And you can see that almost 80% of population is the population of the working age. While, according to the predictions, if nothing will change, in 2050, we will have only 73% of population who will be of the productive working age. And that simply means that we have the dramatic increase in the number of people retired and the number of youth who can't work. And that simply means that we working population will spend more and more of a time and efforts simply to enable their living. We will pay taxes, more taxes, so we will have much more pressure on the working populations simply to enable subsidies, pensions, or help to the people who can't work. Definitely. We should take into consideration that this is the situation that is taken as a stable, that nothing will change. Definitely policies can change. Definitely the idea of lifelong learning and then the lifelong, for example, employability is also could be introduced. But nevertheless, you can see how the the demography will influence overall the situation in the country. If nothing changes, we will simply lose 7% of the working population in a few years. So in 30 years, when the majority of us and you who are watching this video, especially young colleagues that will be at the top of the working age, you will see that you will feed much more people that the present population in Ukraine of 2020 is doing that. So much more harder. Living will be much more harder. And yeah, and this decline of labor is both tricky because from the one part, indeed, the problem is when we see the decline of labor force. However, when we see, for example, the technologization of work, when the productivity of work is growing, then it's pretty okay. However, this is not, unfortunately, the case for Ukraine. In the many major cases, overall structural, we still not have this high level of the productivity. So that simply means that we will lose simply the working hands. And if we will not find a strategy what to do, it will be really hard for the next generations to cope with this problem. However, this is also a tendency that happened, that decline in labor force can also stimulate the wage growing, and we directly see it. There is a fall in 2020 once more because of the coronavirus. Nevertheless, the wages are growing. And but they are growing not only in Ukraine, so they are growing in all our neighbors, and so the issue of the labor migration is still present in our understanding of the labor market in Ukraine. And indeed, migration is a challenge. So you can see here the number of migrants. Once more, this is official UN data that is based on the Ukrstat, on Ukrainian statistics. However, the numbers could be estimated by researchers that the numbers are even higher several times. But blue, this is with the blue lines, this is number of Ukrainians who are going to work abroad, so labor migrants, and the red, this is number of the labor migrants that are coming to Ukraine. So overall, you can see that pretty the same numbers. However, starting from let's say 2000s, there are more people from Ukraine who are going abroad, and especially to work abroad. So the interesting thing here with the growing of wages, actually migrants could be one of the part of the solution. How to keep the labor force. However, once more, it really depends on the state strategy, how we are building our structure of market. And the structure of job market in Ukraine is the next point for discussion. Actually, if we take the employed population of the 15 or 70 years, once more, because after the pension for these 10 years of officially, today in Ukraine, women are going at 60 and men are going in at 65. However, they can work during this time, and the majority of cases, so usually the average data is showing that women are going at 60s and the men are going at 60s. However, it will change. It will definitely change because it's overall global trend of elders working more. So if you take like 15 and 70 years old, so you can see that the majority of people in Ukraine are engaged into the agriculture, forestry, and fishing, in the industries, then in the retail or trade, repair of vehicles and motorcycles, then transportation, logistics, storage. Then you can see public administration and defense, compulsory social security services, education, and also public health, human health, and social work activities. So this is a majority, but the structure fields where Ukrainian are working. And what is interesting here that this is actually these markets that are growing. And here you can, on this chart from Ukrainian Week, there is an interesting point that is showing that actually what we are paying for what services in the internal market we are paying, that's actually is growing. So you can see here that the labor productivity was growing in the financial and insurance activities in the last years before the 2020, because it changed a little bit to this data. But before this, so financial sector was growing, and actually but the wages here were not so big when the productivity was growing. So that's mean that this kind of professions, this kind of the market was pushed a little bit by the technologies, but by the people interest, and there was a big competence in this field. It is natural, because in the number of cases, economics, accounting, and financials is also one of the most interesting fields of the higher education. So the people simply go into this field. Then real estate transactions was really growing, and construction and buildings in the number of the cities. While, for example, the wages were growing simply in education, in arts, sports, and leisure, then in the healthcare, hotels, and restaurants before 2020 once more. That is an interesting point. And you see that the labor productivity and wage growth was correlating in the agriculture, then in the fishing and forestry, and then governance, and then defense, and a little bit with IT and telecommunications. Then that means that these fields, these structures was very naturally growing. There was not like deficits in the production and prices and wages that people have, and also the number of people who were engaged into this field. So in overall, so the real GDP growth, if we see by the sector, was indeed in construction, in financial services, in agriculture, in IT, and real estate. So they were growing much more higher than the economy. And definitely the 2020, they changed a little bit the situation because of the quarantine. A lot of hospitality services were simply killed or stopped at least. But nevertheless, we can see that construction is what is predicted to be growing in Ukraine. It will likely expand because there are a lot of funding that was present in that market. It was considered to be interesting for the cities. Moreover, some of the big state programs occurred. Actually, the government started this program of repairing roads, so building new roads in the next years, and also the building some commercial properties. So this market is believed to grow. To growth, and the more and more people will be there. Then financial and insurance services, that was before the 2020, and they really depend on the crisis. Now, as you can see, the crisis, so definitely in this year, in 2020, there was one of the declines in this field. However, this is a field that will restore more quickly. In agriculture and fishery and forestry, one of the major aspects of Ukrainian economy, not the first one, not the second one, but actually in the top fifths, we will have the agriculture present. So, and what we can see, especially take into account the market inside of the country and what we trade with other countries, once more crops, more agricultural products, and that simply means that this market will be growing. And now we know that IT and telecommunications and IT industry is rapidly growing in Ukraine. So Ukraine itself became in the top 10 outsourcing markets in the world in terms of the IT, and there are still this tendency is kept. So IT market and sphere is growing. So, and that will be happening in the next few years. So, and it generally defines to the major extent what will be in terms of the future job market in Ukraine. So we will have, so we can compare with the World Economic Forum prediction with this skills that will be needed in 2025. And you can see here that the critical thinking and analysis, problem solving, then self-management and working with people and management communications and definitely technologies will be one of these fields that will be increasing dramatically, more than 40% of the existing levels, skills measuring, whatever you can take as the words for that. And that pretty the same that we have here in Ukraine. So according to the research made by Miller and Safir in 2019, so actually they used a little bit older data, but nevertheless, that is what Ukrainian companies demanded from their employees overall on Ukrainian markets. So the teamwork, technology, then communication, foreign languages, motivation, ethics, so and other number of the skills that were needed according to the research of the vacancies that were present of the market. And you can see that the top positions are not about the technical skills, however, technology knowing, so this is one of the highest position, but mainly of the socio-economical skills and cognitive skills. And this is exactly what World Economic Forum is predicted. Not the same words, but exactly the meaning is the same. So that simply means that despite of the little bit differences and technological out of dateness of Ukrainian market nevertheless, this prediction of World Economic Forum is quite workable for Ukrainian conditions. The only we should keep in mind that in our reality, construction, agriculture, finances, then real estate, technologies, these are the markets that nowadays mostly growing. Manufacturing is also taking a lot in the field of economy, but however, this market is not growing. It's producing a lot, but it's not unfortunately growing. So these are the markets that will definitely define some of the job professions that will be present in the Ukrainian system. And it's quite interesting because a few years ago, when we were starting ethics, politics, economy program, we made a research with UKU stakeholders. We were talking about the what actually to the ideas of the employees, of their needs, of their considerations, we as a university should produce what professions, what people in terms of, in the field of the social sciences, social and behavioral sciences. And you can see that these were professions that were mentioned. So the database administration, it was in 2016, then analytical, people with analytical skills, specialists in public administration, then economists, IT professionals, experts on cybersecurity, and so on and so forth. And then in 2020, we asked them what actually professional skills are needed right now in the new world. And you can see that the majority of the respondents, and they can, they had the possibility to pick different and several skills, but the majority of them actually mentioned about the skills, an analysis of and interpretation of data, preparation of different analytical writing reports, writing skills of different kinds of text, memo, policy papers, white papers, briefings, and so on and so forth. Then languages are important, then social research techniques and ability to design a research, to use different instruments, as well as the organization skills, were at the top basis that our friends, colleagues, donors, and stakeholders overall that engage into business and public administration, they mentioned. So, and once more, that simply shows that those trends that are happening in the world, they're also happening here, and they pretty shows that this is our task, how we should prepare people for the future world. So overall, if we are talking about the political science, it would be interesting for political science students. These were the most 4 key positions that actually business or government needed and addressed us to prepare this kind of people. So the analysis and development of public policy, then analysis of foreign policy, feasibility and conflict resolution, and political communications. So these specialists in political science field were needed mostly in 2020. So what are the main problems of the job market in Ukraine? What is happening here? Practically the same troubles as in the world. However, we have our local specific, and one we have already mentioned. This is simply demography that is going down, and will be sooner or later will be lacking a labor force to make a productivity, and that simply means that will be cutted with the possibility to do an economic growth, because there is a simple influence. If you have more labor force, then you can simply do more work and earn on that. So the dramatic fall of the number of people who are living in Ukraine is a problem number one. Then we have a shadow market, up to 14% according to different researchers. Once more, it's not official, so we can't state the direct percent. And it's influenced because we have people who are unidentified, so we don't know whether they're employed or no, so they are not happening to find themselves in the state statistics. So this is so-called undefined unemployment, and we don't know actually how many places or jobs the shadow market has. Then we have the disproportion of labor market in offer and demand of vacancies in some of the areas. We have huge labor migration, even in terms of the official statistics, and we can brain drains. So a number of Ukrainian qualified specialists are of the great demand abroad, so they are living there. So left in Ukraine. And also we have the deficit of skilled workers in the certain areas, especially in the machine building and in the machinery, once more because the older standards are not working to the major extent anymore, while the supply chains have not changed dramatically in the big factories. So this is a tricky problem from the both sides. And we will touch some of them. Let us start from the disproportion in the labor market. So according to the State Statistics Service in 2019 and 2020, we have disproportion. So that simply means that we have more vacancies and the lesser demand. And once more, we have biggest demand on lesser vacancies in certain industries. And while you can see here on the chart from the that is built by the UA News based on the State Statistics Service data overall in 2020, so we have a big deficit of workers, and this deficit is growing, and probably due to coronavirus it will be growing in the next few years. So the majority deficit workers were in the field of construction, more than 27%, then industry, trade, agriculture, education, and health. And this is interesting because this is directly one of the most most demanded positions, for example, in Europe, where Ukrainian labor force is going. Then, at the same period of time, we have deficit of vacancies. That means that we have more people with such type of education, but there are no vacancies on the free market, and this is public administration, finances, and law. And according to the State's Statistics Service, once more, we have the disproportion in the many technical and vocational, let's say, field, because even the share of technical education is different. So that the share of the technical education for the 15-35 years old people right now is nearly 26%. However, in 50s and 70, for the 50 years old to 70 years old was 41%. That simply means that the structure of economy that was built, take into account through the Soviet times, and then at the beginning of Ukrainian independence, that was oriented with the high technical educations. So now it's not working, and however, in the number of cases, our policies haven't changed dramatically. Only these years there are some shifts and tries to understand how to move with that. The other problem is the share of the companies as employers. So in Ukraine, we have nearly 20% of big companies, and big companies, huge companies. There's or corporations. These are companies that employ more than 500 of people, while the majority of the companies are small and medium enterprises. It's called SMEs, small and medium enterprises, 80% of them. However, the small and medium enterprises produce only 15% of GDP for Ukraine, while, for example, in our neighboring states, in Poland, and Latvia, and Estonia, you can see that the number of production, the input of the small and medium enterprises is much more higher. So here is also the disproportion and not correct structure of the economy, while you have a number of the small companies or medium-sized companies or private enterprises where people are engaged, so more and more engaged. However, the lack of effective production into the national into the GDP. While we have not so many big companies, definitely a lot of people are engaged there. However, they define actually the market. They, to the magic extent, define these companies define what will be the trends where we could be going, just because they are producing much more. So labor migration is another problem, and indeed it is one of the huge problems in Ukraine. So we can see that once more, according to the estimation, not official statistics, but estimations, in 2012 there were at least 1.6 million of people who were labor migrants. Then at least 2 million people were in 2017, and in 2019 were approximately 2.5 million people. So this is a great part of the labor force that was actually working abroad. And you can see how the situation changed for 2000 and 2017. So Russia was actually Poland. Russia was one of the dominant places in 2012 when the number of people decreased, and they dramatically increased in Poland. However, in the other European countries, the situation is pretty the same. And in non-European states, some United States, Canada, then also Israel, for example, become one of the interesting places of destinations of Ukrainian labor force. Pretty remains the same. And here, if we can actually ask what is who are going like abroad, you can see that migrants actually are overwhelming from the rural part, from the western part of Ukraine. Yes, and you can see that this is the majority of them. And also, we can see here that if we see the chart of the urban and rural citizens, you can see that the majority of people are probably from the rural areas that are going, especially from the west. So that simply correlate. For example, like in Italy, yeah, and in Poland, and overall. So then the interesting case is about the age. And the majority of the cases, we can see that this is exactly working age of the population. So that is very natural. However, so 48 years old, that simply means that this is the largest structure in general for the labor migrants. Then following with the 59 years old, and it's basically because of the Italy. And in Poland, for example, the tendency is once more for the 49. However, you can see that the younger population is also going to work in Poland. Then, if we see what are the kinds of the occupation at the destination country, once more, the majority of cases, totally this is agriculture workers. And what is also interesting here, this is like the elementary occupations. And to the major extent, it's dangerous a little bit, because if people didn't stay abroad for the living, that simply means that this, especially like agriculture workers, then elementary occupations, so they don't require the high skills, and it simply means that there is a danger of them not to develop their skills, and then entering Ukrainian market, they will be unskilled. So there will be a problem for them to find the necessary work, especially when the markets in Ukraine will be demanding more and more skillful skillful labor, and their work as unskilled people will be much more lower than, so the wages of this work will be much more lower comparing with the, let's say, Central European countries. So that simply means that in the future, they will simply cut from the employability schemes, and they'll be a part of the unemployment problem. So the other story that was majorly, I was focusing on the skills, but the other story is about the brain drain and with the skillful workers. According to the Atlantic Council, 2020, 0.1% of Ukrainian labor population, this is approximately 20,000 of people, qualify as highly skilled labor, and they are working abroad. And the problem here is not about the people that are simply working abroad. The problem here is that according to the World Economic Forum of the global competencies, Ukraine has low capacity to retrain very fast and effectively new talents. So overall, we are producing that, and this is how the education is pretty working properly here. Nevertheless, this is not happening like dramatically fast, and our rank is actually, in terms of the global competitiveness, is not so high. So this simply means that we could have possibly a problem when without changes in the preparations, we'll be lacking skillful workers to be present in the domestic economy, and then simply means that we will have to hire somebody out of Ukraine, paying more for that, or like we should find some solutions how to invest into the preparations of the skillful workers and letting them be present in the Ukrainian job market. And here you can see, according to the Euromaidan Press 2018, these are the top destination points of Ukrainian IT specialists. So the majority of them, there was a research here in 2018, the big survey. So the majority of people were staying like in Western Central Europe, then it's North America, and the question is that before the survey, before this years of 2018, a lot of them lived ever before. And it was surprising for the survey that out of, if I'm not mistaken, 30,000 of people who were, or 20,000 of people who were asked during this survey, near 4 or 5% of the people told that they have left country like years before they have already been abroad. It was an article and research that was focused on who wants to go abroad. So in general, here, and IT specialists here, this is a very good answer that sometimes wages are not the only reason of being abroad, but overall the industry and the infrastructure, for example, can influence their decision. But this is the other topic. Yeah, and this is quietly correlate with the official statistics. Here you can see that in terms of the formal employment, so the full-time jobs, that's the formal employment, the majority of complete higher education, while people with no education or with just no, here with no education, but who have complete secondary education or just vocational education, colleges are mainly concentrated on the on the informal employment. And through this, we can also judge that actually educating people, bringing them to the can make this effect of their presentees more in the formal sector. Yeah. And all these tendencies, they definitely create the problem of unemployment in Ukraine. So In the last years, we can see that there were much more people who were unemployed than vacancies that existed on the open market. And according to the Ukraine Open for Business report, we can see that especially this number has dramatically increased during the 2000 when we have the 2020 when we have the coronavirus crisis. So once more, in terms of the participation rate of population, so we can see that the majority of people of the working age, they are included into these formal and employability that we can divide, and official employability that we can divide. However, the unemployment rate of the population still present, and this is official rate. So once more, this is official rate of the labor force for the relevant age group. However, unofficially, we don't even know how many people are on the unofficial rate. Overall, if you use the International Labour Organization methodology, we can see that totally in Ukraine we have near 9% of the official unemployment. Once more, and this is pretty what the other states have. So once more, that to some extent the level, not huge level of unemployment, up to 7 or 8% could be good, because that simply if the structure of the economy is working properly. So that simply means that there will be competency between the labor force. The majority, you can see, it's comparing like males and females, we can see that the males are more unemployed than women. And then comparing the rural and urban areas, once more people from the rural areas face more unemployment than people from the rural areas. And then the Ukrainian statistics also gives us some of the reasoning. So what are the reasons for the unemployment? If we can see here on this table that I download from the Ukrainian state statistics, you can see that the laid off for economic reasons and simply that jobs disappeared was decreasing. However, this percentage is still present here, while overall the people of the unemployed decreased a little bit. But what is tricky here, that the number of people who decided dismissed on their own will increased. And this is also partly the answer to the overall situation, economic situation in the country, and the wages that they can get, and also with the mobility, with the migration of the labor force that we can observe. What is interesting here, that the number of people who can't find job after the graduation of the educational institutions also decreased overall, and this is a good tendency. So that means simply that universities or schools are preparing people better for the field of education. However, once more, this is just statistical data. You should see what kind of vacancies they are getting. But what is dramatically bad, at least take into account 2019, these are layoffs caused by health and by the disability or about the patient. So this could be only 1 year tendency, but however, in the next year it will happen. There will be serious problems of the injuries and what is happening with the health issues during the working period. So this reason of dropping out of the job should be researched more carefully. Yeah, and overall, so we can see overall that the majority of the people who are unemployed, yes, as a type of economic in the field of economic activity, so are like in terms of the agriculture, industry and construction, and the retail trade and vehicles and motorcycles, but also to the public administration and also education. So these are people who were dropped off through these fields. And once more, nothing strange, because more people are engaged just in this industry that we see that unemployment rates will be also to the major extent present and connected with these industries. But what is interesting that in general we can see more people unemployed on the urban areas than from the rural areas. However, here what is interesting, just pay attention on the agriculture, forestry, and fishing. So more people unemployed officially here for the rural areas, and that is very tricky. That simply means that people actually can do job, but unofficially. So that is why they are appearing here in these statistics. Yes, and here you can see the unemployment rate year by year, like especially in terms of the youth unemployment, and you can see that in Ukrainian case it's falling. So that is a good. There is a good tendency. However, what is tricky here, it's about the rural and urban areas differences. So the more and more people from the rural area, they can't find a job. So, and that is why they could explain partly why they are moving to the big cities, because it's much more easier in the big cities to find the job. And actually, if we see the structure, what are the most places in Ukraine with vacancies, you can see that the big cities are one of the top places where you can find these jobs. So Kyiv, Lviv, Odessa, Dnipro, Kharkiv are the cities with the mostly concentration of vacancies for people. So in terms of gender employment, once more, in Ukraine, it's simply here we have more men than women of the working age who are officially unemployed. However, once more, the tricky situation is with data, because we don't know. The majority of people can do a job or can't be in the state statistics, because they are not coming to the state services and showing that they are unemployed. So COVID-19 made a great influence on the Ukrainian situation. Employment in general has decreased. At the same time, wages have not recovered during the COVID period, at least in 2020. So you can see that starting from the quarantine time that started in March 2020, more and more people were officially declaring themselves as unemployed. And this number of people was dramatically growing until the summer, until the June. However, in July and August, it was a little bit declining. While the average salary that doesn't change dramatically. So here, overall, the number of vacancies that were needed, they didn't construct the growth of salaries. So you can see that like at the end of the year, the salary was at the end of the summer, the salary was the same at the beginning of the March. So that simply means that a little bit the structure of the employment was different. And sadly, but this also meant that in the number of sectors where people were employed, and the majority of the cases they were employed in services, in hospitality business, in tourism business, so these businesses simply felt, and they probably were simply closed down because the people still are lacking of the job. So on the other point, COVID-19 has led to the optimization of the work and the higher competition. And a number of industries were simply rebuilding their staff, especially those businesses who are working like a branch business, but they have different locations in different cities. So they're trying to rebuild the construct of the company, like making less bodies, concentrate mainly on the general staff, and actually give a lot of work for outsourcing without the necessity to build branches and to have offices, for example, for these branches. So according to the research, HR during the pandemic that was conducted by the business in cooperation with GRC Ukraine and KPMG Ukraine, the majority of the employees, 71%, managed to maintain the natural turnover of the staff. So that simply means that only 1/3 of the country had to close and to fire people overall. However, a number of them, according to this research, have cut tremendously the growth of the wages or the salaries, or even cut some of the wages, or are planning to do this. And once more, this is not finished situation. So only in a few years after the COVID will stop fully and economy will be recovered, we can calculate and estimate what the real impact of COVID-19 on the economy was done. But what COVID helped us to understand more precisely, this is the lack of accurate data. This is the trouble that we can see in the state statistics and what is happening exactly. Because the numbers that were, and it's very easy in crisis, like even in terms of survey, to identify these differences. And these differences between the official statistics and between the surveys is really huge. So according to the research, which was done by the Center of Economic Strategy, so you can see that official statistics, and this is the lower limit, showed that the people were unemployed before quarantine near 1.6 million or 1.5 million, and this is 9% of the working population, of the workforce. And surveys showed to some extent pretty the same. But while the official statistics showed that only 2% of the people lost their job due to the quarantine, the unofficial surveys showed that these are 16% of the workforce. And that simply means that all these people, they didn't came to the state services to say, okay, I need a job. They simply somewhere disappeared. But state services actually, and they're building policies and investing into this field, mainly take into account official statistics. So this is a problem. Then total unemployed during the quarantine, if we take this 400,000 of people plus people that were employed before, and then you can see the 2 million of people who officially are unemployed. However, a number of researchers, and especially Center of Economic Strategy, is stating that near 4.4 million of people lost their job or are unemployed. The other tricky thing is that in the hidden unemployment, yes, so you can see the difference, and you can estimate that 3.5 million of people, 17% of the working population, they have hidden unemployment. That doesn't mean that they sit at home, yes, but they can work, partly work somewhere, but this is not full work according to the surveys. And this is very dangerous because if they are excluded, so once more, it's nearly 20%, 1/5 of the working population that is not included into the policy making analysis. And this is one of the troubles that need to be recovered, and mainly not because the data collection by the state services is bad, but because the people behavior is bad. So they didn't manage to show that they need their help, and they do not consider it necessary, and so on and so forth. So the monitoring, the accurate monitoring, and bringing up into the official statistics that will be enough to build some strategies, smart strategies, is really one of the problems. And COVID-19 also changed a little bit market, as talked previously. So the hospitality business was almost not killed, but it is really hard for them. So HoReCa, for example, restaurants, tourism, hostels, beauty salons, and so on and so forth. So these were entertainment centers. This was a biggest decline in terms of the vacancies, in terms of the job offers, and that's quite understandable. However, at the same period of time, there were growth of demanded positions during the quarantine. That was mainly in retail and wholesale trade, especially sale consultants. People didn't stop buying products, buying in the retail, in the food retail, for example, businesses. So it's different, the ability to buy more expensive, for example, products, but nevertheless they're still present here. So this market was pretty full of job vacancies. Then online marketing and sales, manufacturing, truck drivers, mechanics and mechanisms, and taxi drivers was with the big push. So at least what we can see right now by the number of vacancies, these are the most booming professions and markets here that we can right now see in Ukraine. And this is all a challenge. So these troubles plus COVID plus changes of the market is also a challenge. And even here in terms of vacancies, we can see that these are not technologized in the many cases works. So this is a challenge. And Ukraine has its strategy more rather sustainable development goals, giving us some data and some plans. So sustainable development goals are helping us to identify where we could move and set certain priorities to sustain, to achieve the decent work in Ukraine. And overall, we can see that number 8, this is sustainable development goal of Ukrainian in terms of the decent job. And here we can see that while there are some of the aims that we will meet in 2030, nevertheless, there are a group of the indicators of the aims that unfortunately we will not meet until this part. And here you can see that the major troubles that we face is in general, for example, the shared gross field capital to GDP, or for example, a share of exports and goods that are based not on the labor or resources, but more based with the technologies. We will not meet this this aim until the 2030 and in general our technologization of the economy, that means more skillful workers, still under the question. So then the labor productivity index is directly correlates with the labor productivity index, because once more that means that we need more labor, or we need more working hours to fulfill the same job as, for example, could be done in the other countries with more technological way of production, with by lesser number of working hours, or by the lesser number of people who are employed. And then the return of the assets, yes, that is how much we invest and what we get from the invest in terms of the prices. Once more, technologization, is one of the most important issues in terms of the Ukrainian economy and market overall. But then the troubles with security, and that is why probably we have this, remember, this increase in the number of the drop-offs from the job for the reason of injuries or for the reason of inability to work in the safe conditions. So this is one of the important challenges that we will not meet, but so we should work more better on that. And then people who are engaged into small and medium enterprises and actually their ability to do their business to impact the economy once more. We can see directly that the majority of the people are engaged. However, they are not bringing major input into the development of the country. Only 15% of the GDP, 80% of people who are engaged into small business and medium business enterprises are producing. And one of the reasons is definitely the difficulty to start and run business in Ukraine, and the price of this difficulty. So now it's becoming much more easier, once more because of the technologies that help. However, you can see that the position, the rating of doing business is not growing dramatically. We actually defined that in 2020 we should be in this number 30, the best countries in terms of the doing business. But nope, we didn't come to that mark, to that position. So a lot of job should be done. And this is direct the question for the policy making, how we can make our jobs more effectively. And the tremendous shift was done in 2020, actually at the end of the 90s, start of the 20, when the new law on labor was introduced, and that replaced labor code that we have, and that was collection of different laws on the labor. And the tricky thing that this labor code was adopted in 70s, and to the major extent, Ukraine was using the same logic as of the Ukrainian USSR in the present 21st century. So what are the main challenges? It's quite despicable, this new law on labor. Nevertheless, the main differences that were introduced is actually contracts for irregular work, that new form of fixation of predetermined irregular work, and that helps the workers to have as much contacts as they want, and then simply means that, yeah, we'll legalize this irregular work. However, yeah, you can do it, you can take some, you should pay taxes from that, but you will get the social security of even irregular work. And also this law on labor allowed flexible working hours that could be defined by the person and by the employer and employer, and also the ability to have the remote work. This is especially critical in terms of the COVID, but after the COVID, once more, the market will be changed, and the majority, according to even the international surveys and trends, there will be a number of works that would be done staying at home, and we should adapt to these changes. And that's what was done in this new job on labor. Then financial airbag on firing from 1 to 6 salaries, depending on the length of the service of the employee and the enterprise. And that gives some guarantee, and the legislator believes that it also can reduce the searching period for another work from 4 to 2 months, because people will not be relying on this work, so they can try, and they will have some airbag, somebody will, so the money will stand with them. But on the other point here, it was a tricky thing, that introduction of so-called at-will system, as in the United States, so the people could be fired in one day. There is no cases of discrimination that is usually forbidden. But they also introduced the system that, for example, the longer you work, the more days before firing, enterprise should announce you. So if you're working less than 6 months, if I'm not mistaken, you can be fired within the one day. If you are working like from 6 months to 1 year, then like 15 days and 30 days and 90 days. So this kind of possibility you have, and this is both good and bad. So the labor organizations are criticizing for these decisions because they simply show that people could be unprotected, and partly that is true. On the other part of the problem was that this labor code, very socialistic in their nature, enabled the possibility for the many of businesses simply to fire a person who was not doing the job well, because there are so many but in brackets that it was sometimes impossible to do this. Even only in the cases when there is a concretely could be the cases proven in court, for example, that that employee has brought some difficulties for company, or for example have a great impact on the of the earnings, that could be a reason. But they have a number, thousands of different reasons not to be fired. That was pretty difficult. Then students' internships, so-called students' contracts, were also introduced. There is once more a form of the short-term contracts up to 6 months to work legally. And this is really great in terms of the for example, in terms of some voluntary work, or in terms of the internships. And this could be a part of the previous experience. So by this, we can kill like the problem when entering the future jobs. Students sometimes are considered as those who don't have working experience, while they could do a number of different internships, and now it will be a part of the official, let's say, logic. And then digitalization of working process. So starting from the counting years of works, and then with the processes, for example, of signing agreements online, not on the paper. So all this stuff was introduced and legalized in the new Code on Labor. However, it is not like solving all the situation. Once more, there are a number of debates and a number of things that should be done. And analysis is showing that, first of all, we should invest into the reform of the institutional environment. So reform labor regulations to reduce labor cost. And so the enterprises can invest more into the job creation, into people who are working on that, not rely just on the universities or schools, but invest into their labor. So they should have free costs to do this. Then reform education training institution to validate, to align education and training curricula with the sector employment needs, and required industry credentials to form on the possible and necessary things that on the places both enterprises, employers, together with educational institutions, together with the training sectors, could do what they can, like to fix the problems they have. Then create firm level incentives to train. Previously I was talking a little bit about. So to invest into the dual education, invest into training and opportunities, internships, fellowships, just to provide early sector workplace experiences and entrepreneurship. So simply gives money to the grassroots level, so the companies could do this. And this will be more effective than invest into the standardized university curriculums that could definitely be not so flexible. So not all of the universities were so flexible to do that job, and then use the social security contribution tax to subsidize this job creation and investment into the work skills, and then provides assistance to individuals to improve the functioning of the employment and training consistent programs to help vulnerable people, to help people who lose their job, to provide financial incentives for skills upgrading, for continuous training, for lifelong learning, and then to also to provide some financial help, or let's say tax cutting help to produce entrepreneurship, like to engage more and more people into their own businesses. But together with these structural changes, also more should be done, like to encourage people to agree that these legalized forms of part-time involvement into, for example, internship contracts, students' contracts, so on and so forth, are worse for them to be a part of their story and to take taxes instead of not paying taxes and at all. And the major question is here how to get people from this shade of economy, how to get people from these hidden forms of the unemployment or hidden forms of the employment. Then how to reorient markets in order people of working age can enter it earlier without the necessity to gain higher education. Because once more, according to the many researchers, for example, Markowitz and Andrews, research of OECD countries, they come that too many people with a higher education is bad. One part of the story, because you lose you lose labor force of the young labor force, especially, that could be a part of the economic process. And on the other hand, so the trouble is that sometimes for the job vacancies of skills, you don't need like people with higher education, but you simply lose the years of the working, because it is believed that the person is working better in the number of vacancies only after having higher education. So that's not true. So sometimes it could be an overlap of people with the higher educations that can slow the productivity of economies. So the earlier people start working, the better it is. And then they can have the higher education a few years after the working experience. That's not the trouble. So this idealization of higher education as an ability and the impact of and influence on the skills should also be changed. Then how to limit or compensate the labor migration. This is a tricky thing, because indeed we need labor to work. We see the demographic changes, and if we will not do it by ourselves, then the pretty interesting idea is simply to get the labor force from the other countries to be engaged. But who will be working in Ukraine with this type of wages? So there are many of calculations and surveys that actually showing that at least 70% of the Central European countries' salaries can help to stop these flows of the labor migrants of Ukrainians to Europe. On the other point of view, probably we will also see the labor migrants from the other countries that will be going and coming here to Ukraine to have the more wages than in their own countries. Then educate according to the future market needs, to research to do this and to do the flexibility of curriculums, focus on the small and medium enterprises growth. We have talked about it previously. Then technologization and innovation in production and supply chains. So it will help, even if we'll see the decrease in number of the labor, but technologies and the new ways of production that are working with the growing productivity, growing production results of the work can actually cut this existing gap. And one of the most important is accurate data collection, monitoring, to simply build the data-driven strategies. Without them, it will be impossible to do the structural reforming, very complex reforming in this field, because once more, a number of global issues, and especially the issues that are connected with employability, they don't have the clear solutions. Everything depends, because they're really complex, really interdependent with the different forms of social lives. That is why the behavioral studies can help us a lot, but we need clear and good data to scope with that. Yeah. And finally, what is more important here, to invest. Indeed, investment is important, especially in the helping people to be present on the labor market, not to disappear, not to hide themselves, even in the cases when they lose their job. So once more, according to the International Labour Organization calculator of what could be done in terms of the income support schemes, to influence the active labor market policies and to push the employment rate and to decrease the unemployment rate, we can see that in general, at least in 2020, according to the budget, Ukraine had to spend 1.2 billion of Ukrainian hryvnias for the income support policies, and that is 0.1%, almost 0.13% of the GDP, and then simply means that in this chart, in these calculations, we are not helping situation at all. We are not fixing situation at all. Due to Corona crisis, in 2020, government of Ukraine decided to invest more 6 billions of hryvnias into the income support schemes. And here on this chart is the result, because together with this previously 1.2 designed billions of hryvnias designed for this help, you can see that at least we can push a little bit labor force participation. And that's what we actually see. These are real results, because there was a fight for the vacancies. The vacancies increased. The people started to search for some additional, let's say, training centers who can educate them. They can use this money. They can use some period of time, not to fear to lose the possibility to leave, yes, and they have some support from the state to help their families. So that means that they will have a short period of time, but some of the interest to find a new job, and that a little bit that pushed the situation, however, not influencing dramatically on the employment or unemployment rates. So financing and finding the sources to finance is one of the also steps that should be done. That's what I have for the topic of the labor market. Be attentive with them. Let's study this topic, and let us make our labor market real great in terms of both social security and in terms of the impact of economy.